you know, if you're going to be successful, you have to approach things from being all in. You can't just focus in on productivity. You can't just focus in on some of those other things. So that's kind of where we're going to go with this discussion this afternoon. So with that, I would like to go ahead and I would like to introduce Rita Naylor. She is my cohort, and she basically, for all of you that have attended my workshops in person, she has been the one person that keeps us straight. She reserves all the rooms. She manages to make sure that we all have food and coffee and all those fun things. So she kind of keeps things straight. So as you can imagine, I've been pulled off the road, well, let's see, what was it, the middle of March, and haven't been in the office since. And so Rita has volunteered to help me with the Zoom meetings, and so she kind of keeps track of things. So we got a few people in here today, about 15 on top with the two of us. And so, you know, I know that when you guys, if you have a question to ask, you can use chat. If you would like to ask it verbally, I know that for me, if I'm gonna type a question in, we'd probably be about 5 or 6 slides ahead before I got my question typed in. So if someone wants to ask a question and you know, auto voice wise, we can certainly do that. So we want to just make sure that everyone gets a chance, and please don't wait to the end of the presentation. Trying to have some again, you know, some participation with these presentations. I know that's a little tougher than when I'm in person and that kind of thing. One of the things that I will tell you too is that Rita has instructed me to take a breath every now and then, because I have a tendency to get on a roll. And this one, I really get on a roll. So please, if there's a question, let's make sure that you guys ask it so that we can get it answered. Okay. Rita, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, just breathe once in a while. I told this morning it reminded me of my aunt because I could never get a word in otherwise. So I said, just take a breather once in a while.
There you go. All right. So we're going to try that. So I think it's important when we talk about this, let's go ahead and we'll start getting into this conversation of all-in leadership. And to be honest with you, I've really enjoyed putting this topic together. As a matter of fact, I started reading this book, and the more I read it, the more, I mean, I was going through there. It's quite a good book, but I kind of wanted to do this as we get into this. This is kind of my journey, if you will. Or my understanding when I first started into safety. We knew when I first cross-trained into safety that there were certain parts of things that needed to be there. But as I went through, the first thing we kind of focused in on was the fact of kind of some of the things you needed to do. Now, first of all, though, I would tell you that, let's see if I can, not getting it in here. Whoops. There we go. Okay. Is that I kind of added this piece in after I kind of covered some of the other things, because I'm a firm believer that every organization has a safety culture. It really does. You know, whether it's good or bad, that's the other question. The other part of that is that really seriously, I don't know if it's a safety culture or if it's a good culture overall. I think those are the important things that when you look at it. But I do believe that there are some companies that they do have some safety going on, even though there may not be a management process. So when you look at the management process, we call that, if they're doing stuff without that management process, this is what we call the swamp. They start down here and you know, they're happy. They don't tell me what the rules are. They're kind of already protecting their people somewhat. By, you know, just kind of word of mouth, kind of those kind of things within the organization. But as I started into this, the first thing that they gave me was the fact that we needed to identify physical hazards. And so this was when I was in the Air Force. I cross-trained from being a jet engine mechanic into the safety field. And the first thing they did was take us into a shop and start identifying all of those things that you would consider hazards. So we started doing that. And then once we did that, we came back to the classroom, and even outside of class, to be honest with you. And then now you have to cite those conditions that you found that you didn't like. So that was all those physical hazards that we started seeing. So we looked at that, we said, okay, so all of these physical hazards that we have identified, now we have to cite them. Now we have to find the reference in the book for these things. And that's kind of where you started. Now, the next step then is to realize that, you know what? We have some programs that we need to have in place. So we need lockout, tagout, we need HAZCOM, we need, fall protection. We start adding in all these programs. Well, the one thing that we noticed about putting these programs in place is that OSHA never tied them together. So lockout, tagout doesn't really relate to anything in HAZCOM, doesn't relate to anything in fall protection or any of the other ones that we have, hearing conservation, you name it. So when you start looking at that, you go, okay, well, so now we need something a little bit more. And so that little bit more is actually, now we need to have a management system in place. Okay, so now these are the things that we talk about. We're talking about, okay, so we need to have those things like management commitment and employee buy-in. We've talked about employee buy-in when we talk about employee engagement piece now. But we looked at these things and we said, okay, so how often should you do physical inspections? How often should you how often should you do audits? You're looking at all of these different things with your management system. You need to have a safety committee. It should be 50-50, all these kind of things. So if you do all of these things, the original thought was this should take us to that safety culture that we're looking for. But the problem is that you're right. It does give us a structure, but it doesn't really build us to that level that we wanted to get. So then the next thing that came across was that, you know what? You need to have a behavior-based safety program in place. So when we looked at that, we said, okay, so behavior-based, now you're doing observations. Now this becomes a little bit of an accounting nightmare. And in that, you have so many people trained within your organization to do observations. They go out, they do observations. Once they've done an observation, if they're while doing an observation, if they observe an employee doing something that they shouldn't be doing, now we have an intervention. We talk with that employee, we discuss things with them, we decide what needs to happen. Now that we've got that intervention, we come back in a couple of weeks and we do another observation. And if the employee has changed their behavior, that's a win. So now you see what we're tracking. We're tracking all these observations. We're tracking all of these interventions. And now we're tracking, did we make a difference? But it can become kind of an accounting nightmare, if you will. And part of that, and there is, again, it does offer a structure. But one of the things I would say is that the behavior is more an indication of something rather than being it all by itself. So again, we're building on the structure for a culture, but we aren't quite at that desired level of culture that we want to have within our workplaces. So what do we need to do next? And so this is kind of where this comes into play. Both establish good foundations, but they still lack the results that we're looking for. Both establish the need for structure, but are more mechanical. What are they missing? They're missing the human aspect in this. We're not paying attention to the humans. We're not focused. So this is pretty close to that discussion that we had a couple years ago when we talked about humanizing our safety efforts. And so this is just adding more to that thought process in the fact that, yes, we need to address the human side of things. And one of the things, if you're going to address the human side of things, this gets us back to that leadership piece again. And this is where we've been kind of focusing a lot of our safety talks on, is that, there's a lot more to leadership than just yelling at people and telling them what to do. There's part of that coaching process. There's part of the guiding process, being a whisperer, interacting with people in different ways. You have a lot of different toolbox and a lot of different approaches within the things that how you interact with people, that you have to sometimes change gears in how you react with people and how you're talking to them. And so really, when we talk about this, when you're talking about how we're going to connect with people, we have to talk about leaders, because this is where we're going to come together on things. This is where we need to understand that we have to connect both on an individual level, and then we also have to connect on that social level, because we are we tied together in groups. We have a tendency to form strong bonds socially with one another. And so this is where it really comes into play, that we really need to start working on building the stronger bond within the organization, and that's through that leadership model. So this is kind of where I started, because when we talked about humanizing safety, our safety efforts, one of the things where I got some of the information was from this gentleman called Court Dial, and his actual full name is Courtney Dial, and Courtney is an Indian name in which it means calm. And I thought that was kind of important, because in this book that he wrote, Heretics to Heroes, he talked about kind of the things that are in play as far as, how you approach people more calm, not being, in their face, not doing those kind of things. And so it kind of went with his name to a certain extent. That's how he kind of tied things together. But I found it interesting, the information that he had. So to start off with, he started with the leading thoughts. And these were 4 articles that he wrote for Professional Safety Magazine. And this is with the American Society of Safety Professionals. Puts out this magazine once a month. And so the one that I started with was in December 2017, but actually there was 4 articles throughout the year that he had written for them, and these are the 4 that he wrote. And off of that, then I found he wrote this book, and I thought, well, I'll buy the book. And to be honest with you, this is a really good read on a book. Now, a lot of these books that you buy, you find that they really have a tendency to kind of, they put a lot of general theory terms out there, but they're not related to how it actually would work within a business. And this is what I like about this book, was that it actually, he took some stuff in here and he kind of put it in the context of how he grew in the safety career field, and the things that he's done over time as a psychologist, as he's been interacting with stuff, looking at people, looking at businesses, looking at leaders, and how he's kind of interacted with them over the years, and how this has kind of molded his thought pattern for this all-in safety, which really is kind of a unique term when you think about it. All-in safety means that you're looking at everything to deal with leadership. You're looking at everything within the organization, but you're focused in on the human aspect of that as well. It's not just production. It's just not those other things where it's quality and production, but actually putting back into that the human aspect that we're looking at, trying to make people safe. And so, to be honest with you, here's some things that we kind of did, was that as I was reading through this, my son, who works at Papa John's here in town and is the assistant manager, talked about some of the struggles that he was having. And I got to a part of the book and I said, here, read this section. Read this. I need the book back, but you can read this section. He read this section, and he started to apply some of these things in here. But there was a lot of stuff in this book, and the more I read it, the more I'm thinking I need to have all 3 of my kids read this book, because it's got a lot of good concepts in this book that apply to everyday life, but it also applies to, how we deal with people around us. And so I think it's a good read. And so we'll kind of see how this puts together for us. One of the things that Court talked about was that in the 21st century, if you're going to be a pace setter, an architect, or of extraordinary performance and promoters of humanity in the workplace, we need to apply human-based influencing and decision-making that ensure that they and the companies that they lead are in harmony with profitability, sustainability, and meaningful for the employees. And so this is really kind of his thought process, his big vision going forward. And I think that this is one of the things that I really connected with right off the get-go, was that realizing over time that focusing strictly on the OSHA requirements looking at that enforcement part of it, wasn't getting the job done. So when I looked at what he wrote here, which was what he said, when we think solely in terms of numbers and processes, we dehumanize one another, which contradicts safety itself. And so it goes back, it takes me back to, why do we have safety in the first place? We have safety based on the fact that we want to keep our people safe. Yes, there's a productivity, there's a profitability piece that comes with it down the road, but more than anything, we want to protect our people. And so that's really what the heart of our safety program is. But if we're not focused on the people and all we are is looking at numbers and stuff, and he does bring this up in the fact that when he, one of the major things that he got to do was that he was hired by this company, and then they contracted with a larger organization to do consulting work over in the Middle East, outside Bahrain, I think it's Bahrain. But anyway, they talked about how this, when he got there and the processes that were involved. But one of the things that happened was that they first had a meeting. And they went through all the statistics of what they expected from this. So they brought in all the subcontractors and everybody, the major players to begin with. And they started talking about it. And they got to everything. And then all of a sudden they pulled up the safety piece. And then from the safety piece, they said, okay, guys, here's where it's at. This is where we're talking about. So we know we're going to be working with unskilled labor. So we can expect that we're going to have at least a couple fatalities, and we're going to have probably X number of injuries, right? And so he went around the room and he asked every organization that was in that room, can you live with these statistics that we're talking about? And when they got around to court said, no, I can't. I can't live with these statistics. If we're walking into this with the thought pattern that we're going to hurt somebody, then no, we don't want to be part of this. And he says, now, wait a minute, what are you talking about? He says, look, if you're planning from the get-go that it's going to be acceptable that we're going to lose one or two people in a fatality, no, we're not, no, don't even count us in. Well, his coworker had stepped out of the room, and so as they were kind of grilling him on this, the coworker came in and they said, well, here's the numbers we're looking at. And his coworker said, no, I'm with court. If this is the way that you guys are going to look at this, we're not going forward with this project. You guys can get somebody else to come in with you. And so they eventually, other people in the room started voicing concerns about the number situation as well. No, we don't want to be approaching this on the level of, this is the conditions that we're willing to live with. And so I found it unique that they would stand up, first of all, and again, that's that looking at the processes and the numbers. And so when we talk about this, he's going to give us an idea about going forward, that some of the things that we have to do to protect ourselves and to shoot for things. So when we look at it, there's actually 4 fields of safety performance. And we talked about the safety and health management system, and we talked about the behavioral-based safety. But the pieces that we're missing is still the self and the social. And so those are the 2 that we kind of want to talk about. But there really is a division between the 2. When you look at safety and health management systems and behavior-based stuff, that's the hardware. That's the stuff that we're building off of. The software is how we interact with the individual and how we interact as a group and as a team and the things that we decide to take on. So really, it starts coming into that we all have choices. And I found this, because how many of us start off a conversation, well, I really didn't have much of a choice, so that's why I'm here, right? Because you think that you don't have choices, but we do have choices. We have options all of the time. We just don't understand what those choices are, and that the value of choice is really high, because there are some folks that really do not see the choices that they have. So in this discussion, Court talked about, he went overseas, he was at that site in the Middle East, and as he was there, he was talking to one of the individuals, and they said, well, you chose to be here, right? And he goes, no, my company took the contract, and so here's where I have to be. And he says, no, you had an option. And he goes, well, not really, because Well, you did have an option because you didn't have to work for that company. You didn't have to be here. So, the options were that you did have some options. And so he said, well, yeah, I guess I did have an option. And so when he looked at it, he was talking to this guy, and this guy says, that he was from, had been educated in the States. And he said one of the things that happened was his mom and sister came over when he was going through college, through one of the universities, and he took his mom into a grocery store, and it basically blew her mind because, and he was from India. And one of the things in India is they don't have very many choices. I mean, you get what you get for dinner. That's what you were able to catch, or that's what you were able to secure. There's not a lot of options out there. And what he said, she got in there and you could see all these options. Well, the thing is that when you go to motivate people, this is where choice comes into play. The more that they realize that they have a choice and they're consciously making that choice, this is where it comes into play. And so there's also another thing that to take into consideration, that when you make a choice, you create options, you create opportunities for yourself. And so, as so often happens, and my kids give me a hard time about this too, I can go into a store and I start talking to someone, and before you know it, I'm walking out of there 20 minutes later, and I pretty much got this person's life story. They're talking to me, and they call me Chatty Cathy, but I'm constantly talking to people and seeing how things are going. Just interacting with people in general. And so this is kind of what had happened with Court. He was on a plane and he was sitting next to a young lady, and they were kind of started just a friendly conversation. And she talked about how she didn't really like working. She was being an intern at this particular company. And at this particular company, they had chosen to, they needed to come in on a weekend. And one of the gals had to give up part of her 5-year-old's birthday party. Had to leave it early so that she could come in and work in this company. And then what happened was they celebrated that as a company. So they highlighted this gal. Look what she did for the company. She came in, she gave up her, and this gal was like, she was just horrified that they would celebrate that she had to give up something so personal to come in and work for the organization. And so one of the things the Court started talking to her about was the difference between bliss and happiness. And he described it this way. He said, I knew this guy, and he was really distraught because his 7 or 8-year-old son had started to interact with him in a negative way, in the way that he saw that he didn't know his dad that well, didn't want to spend time with his dad, and wouldn't sit next to him at a family function or something. And so his dad was, this guy was really struggling with this process. And so he was talking to Court about it. And he says, I'm really struggling with this concept. And so Court told him, you have an option, do you not? What do you want to be doing right now? He says, well, my son wants to go to the skate park, but I'm here at work. He says, what's stopping you from walking out the door right now? And the guy goes, well, really nothing. I can catch up with work later. I can leave the office now. So he said, would you walk with me? Because I think I'll lose my nerve. He walks him down to the lobby. He's about ready to leave the building, and down comes his boss, and she's got like 3 or 4 of these big ring binders, right? And she goes, I need you to look these things over. We got a 7 o'clock meeting. You need to be on top of this information by tomorrow. And he says, I have a family function I got to go deal with. I will take a look at those as soon as I can. And he left. And Court took this stuff and put it on his desk. The next morning, they didn't even have the meeting because something else came up. And so what he talked about was that, sometimes things work out in your favor, but making choices creates opportunities. And so what he talked about was the fact that, bliss is really the journey of life. That's picking something that gins you up. Those things that, like this, for instance, for me, is to talk to you guys about different safety topics and being able to present different ideas, and that kind of gins me up. That's what makes me good for a long period of time. but it doesn't always make me happy. It stresses me out sometimes, especially when I have to put together a presentation and I'm running late and I'm trying to put all this stuff together. It doesn't always bring me happiness, but it's what I enjoy doing. And so that's the difference between bliss and happiness. Happiness is sometimes a byproduct of the things that we do, but bliss is the path we pick. And so when he was talking to this young lady, he said, so, you know, she got an engineering degree and everything else like that. And so what was her plan of attack? What is she going to do? Well, probably have to work for this company the rest of my life, because if I don't use my engineering degree, it's going to be a waste. And he said, well, what would you like to do if you had a choice? Well, I'd like to become a teacher. He's, well, why can't you become a teacher? Well, she goes, well, you know, this is the problem is that my parents are both engineers. And if I don't become an engineer, they'll think that I've wasted my life. And he says, you know, parents really aren't like that. Parents are only want you to be happy. That's the key to parents. They just want you to be happy and have you, you know, be productive. That's the two things that they're looking at. So what he talked about is that, you know, from the time that we're from about 3 years to 5 years old, during those first couple of years that we're in this world, we get to do whatever we want, basically. You know, we're grabbing stuff. Now, yeah, we get punished if we're not paying attention and stuff, but we're just kind of doing the things that make us happy. About 3 to 5 years into it, this is when we become camels and we start getting loaded up with all the baggage and expectations and everything of society and our expectations from our parents and those kind of things. And then we get that all loaded up on us. And about the time we turn 18 and leave home, now we become lions, because as lions, we have to lead our own lives. But we've got all this baggage that we're carrying around at the same time. But all that baggage kind of morphs into the dragon, okay? So the dragon is all the negative stuff that we're constantly saddled with the rest of our lives. And then sometimes we have to slay the dragon. We have to make changes in the processes that we're looking at and go in different directions than maybe what we started out doing, you know? And so this is the kind of things that he kind of talked about, was that, you know, that value of choice when we're motivating people and people realize that they have a choice in what they're doing. And when they make the choice, when they make the decision, that puts it into their ballpark. They then use that to internalize the direction that they're doing, and they'll hold themselves to a better accountability of that. So that value of choice, again, a leader choosing to enroll. And that's another key word in this process, is choosing to enroll to a commitment of something larger than themselves, to accomplish a task or a project without harming anyone in the process. That is the bigger picture. And that's what he sold that company in the Middle East on, was that starting off with planning to already accept that they would have 2 fatalities and numerous other major injuries was unacceptable. So why can't we go into this? Now, maybe we're going to be successful, maybe we won't. However, there is nothing wrong with taking that on as a challenge. That's choosing to enroll to that in commitment. Again, making the choice that that's the direction we want to go. Now, granted, that takes an everyday commitment, that everything that we do going forward is going to be one of those things that we have to commit ourselves every day that we come in, that we're going to do the things that we can to make sure that everyone is safe and that we're not harming anyone in that process. So when we look at the self and the social, they're the most effective and least utilized of all the motivational type things. They're difficult to implement because we're dealing again with that icky gray matter that comes with human beings. When we talk about the emotional state of people, that's the piece that people have the hardest time wanting to deal with, because as human beings, we don't like dealing with emotions. But that's how we make decisions as people. That's how we interact with people. We are constantly on that emotional process, that we're always looking at things and evaluating things emotionally. Even the toughest, roughest, toughest person sits there and goes, oh no, I make all decisions based on fact alone. Bull crap. They've done studies that show that people that had that part of the brain that control emotions damaged to the point that it doesn't work. They've tested them, they have evaluated them, and they thought, wow, these guys would really make great decisions. Can't make any decisions at all, because that's not how we make decisions as human beings. So we need to connect with people on that particular level, and that's a little bit tougher to do, okay? So when we look at the self, this is really the foundation of the safety performance. It's who you are. What are your values? What is your knowledge? Excuse me. Your beliefs, your self-image. All of these things play into who you are and what you're willing to take on. How you see yourself really truly matters. Because if you see yourself, if you have a low self-esteem, you will never outperform whatever your self-image is. If your image is better of yourself, then you have something to live up to. But if your self-esteem is super low, you never will hit that. So these are things that you have to think about, not just for yourself. Now that's the key here too, is that this is a double-sided road here. Because when you look at this is one direction, is that you're looking at other people and trying to help them out. But at the same time, for you to help other people out, you need to know what your limitations are, how you see yourself, what are your values, what's your knowledge. All of those beliefs and everything that you project certainly plays into it. So this is maybe not a two-sided road, but a double-edged sword, okay? So that one side deals with you, one side deals with the people that you deal with. And as a leader, you're helping develop others as well. So you're spending one-on-one time with your workers. Obviously, what you're doing is you're developing a relationship. So as you develop that relationship, you're building on confidence. You're creating the feelings of appreciation, establishing trust. And the biggest part of this, and this is where it's going to go past the self, but into that social aspect too, but a sense of belonging within the organization. Those are important things to think about. And again, thinking of that, if I'm asking people to commit to my organization, then I also have to plan that I'm going to have to give them opportunity for growth. I need to reinvest back into them as well. So this shows caring, that I care where they're at in their processes, that I want them to get better. I want them to expand their knowledge. I want them to expand who they are. I want them to be able to spread their wings. I want them to be able to take on new challenges. And again, when you're paying attention to this, and this is just creating a stronger trust, stronger sense of belonging, and it also develops just a better relationship with these folks. And part of this comes out is that you will have a stronger team that will emerge, that will come out of this. And then part of this that you have to understand as a leader, that you have to kind of relinquish control to a certain extent. So there was a guy that he was working with that was on the oil fields and more offshore drilling and things like that. And he's dealing with this guy, and this guy was talking about, and he said, I want you to go out there, find out how these people see me. We need to expand, we need to grow. I need to know what's going on in my organization. Do what you need to do. When he came back, there was a huge, he had a report that this guy had to look at, and how people saw him was not how he saw himself. He saw himself as a strong leader going forward, doing those kind of things. But what ended up happening was, what he found out is that he was not releasing control. He was micromanaging. And one thing that will kill any kind of motivation within people is when their boss is doing micromanaging. So at some point in time, you have to relinquish control to other people and allowing them to do something. And the way he described it was like this: tomorrow when you wake up in your organization, and your organization is, let's say every goal that you guys wanted to do, it has been met. You wake up tomorrow, the organization you're in, your organization is doing really good. Everything is running smooth. Everything's doing great. What's your job at this point? And the guy, when he presented that to this individual, the guy said, well, I guess I just need to sit back and look at look forward, not so much back. And that's the point, is that looking forward as a leader, we got to relinquish control to a certain extent. We're still monitoring. That doesn't take away from the monitoring part, but it does mean that we're relying on other people to accomplish things. We're just monitoring to make sure, to see what's going on and just have them report back to us and those kind of things. But we also, as leaders, we need to be looking to the future. What are we going to do? How are we doing things? What's some of the other challenges that we got ahead of us as an organization, rather than looking behind us constantly trying to pay attention to all of those things that are happening that happened in the past? We need to move forward. And again, as a leader, addressing the needs and conditions of your workers is the most conducive to the highest performance that you will get the best results. So again, focusing in on the people, you as a manager, you're going to make sure that you have all the pieces in play, right? You have all the material, the resources, all of those things are set up the way that they should be set up. However, if you want the best results, if you want the best commitment from your folks, then you need to invest in them, and you need to be paying attention to the needs and the conditions that they're subjected to. So one of the things that happened when he was overseas, when he was in the Middle East, was that they knew he was coming. They'd heard about this company, and so the workers were kind of thrilled with the idea that, here's an opportunity for us to kind of make a point. So the person that he was given as far as an interpreter, because everyone else obviously did not speak English, asked him if you could take him out to lunch. So he said, sure, let's go to lunch. And he says, they got in a car and they followed the buses back to the workplace. These are all the workers. So he was going to have them eat with him. And so they all took him back to this, to the camp. There was 2 or 3 camps that they had around the site for these workers, the laborers to work in. And the laborers came from all over. So you had some people from India, some people from Pakistan, people from Jordan and different other places and stuff. And they have a different mindset, obviously, a different culture, if you will. So when he got there, one of the things he noticed was they got to the gate, the buses stopped, everyone popped the gate. Some people went through the gate, some people jumped over the fence. There was a lot of people just a lot of movement. He was like, what's this all about? So when this guy took him into the lunchroom, the one thing that he noticed was that not everybody's going to eat within that period of time. It took 20 minutes to get there. They're going to have to eat in 20 minutes, get back on the buses to get back out to the job site in an hour's time frame. So when he's looking at that, he's going, what in the world? So only half the workforce is going to eat lunch, basically, is what happens. So the next day, they swap out. So whoever had lunch yesterday will stand back and let the people that didn't have lunch today. And so he said, well, that's not right. The other thing that he noticed when he first pulled up to the job site was that he noticed that all the vehicles were under shade. So you can imagine how hot it is in the desert areas over there. He said that when they pulled up, everything was hot and everything else, but they had the cars under shade. And he noticed that some of the workers were actually under the vehicles trying to cool off from the heat. And so this is another thing that they focused in on was, okay, so here's some conditions. Well, when he sees this with the lunch thing, now all of a sudden this adds on to it. And so the guy takes him around and shows him the barracks and stuff. I call them barracks. That's the military part of that, I guess. But their living conditions, they had no place to take showers. They had no place, their mattresses and everything else that they had been there for a long period of time. Since they weren't taking showers, you can imagine what the smell that came off of those mattresses, all of the conditions that you can imagine. They didn't have facilities that was working. So these guys just, if you look at everything that was going on, these guys were living in horrible conditions. And so these are the things, when he came back, he said, no, this is a problem and we need to address this. So he talked to the leader, the superintendent of the job, And when he talked to that guy, he says, all right, we're going to stop the project right now. And for the next 3 weeks, we're focused in on those camps. Let's get them up to speed. Let's get them running water. Let's make sure that we're figuring out how we can feed all of those guys at a lunch period of time, that they have decent sleeping places. They have places that they can lock up their facilities in and all those kind of things. And so addressing the needs and the conditions of the workers is huge when you start to consider some of these things, that how, you're looking at the individuals again and how best to take care of them. But then when you look at yourself, again, model that self-improvement. So if you're asking people to look at self-improvement for themselves, what is the improvement for you? Where are you going to be in 5 years? Model that self-improvement. Consistent self-evaluations. Where are you at? What's your goals? Seek feedback. Now that's important and that's tough, to be honest with you. One of the things that we've been doing with the Zoom training is that afterwards, I've sat afterwards and Rita and I'll talk, and I've had a couple of and I've had one or two of the SMCs that will talk with me as well. And we talk about seeking feedback and some of the things that I do and some of the things that I need to make adjustments with. And it's not always easy hearing some of that feedback, because you think, no, I'm much better than that, and you guys are criticizing me. And that's where it kind of comes into play, is that you have to understand that when you seek that feedback, you have to let go of some of that stuff that comes back, that defensive mechanism that you have internally. Let that go and understand what people are telling you so that you can improve, so that you can make improvements within yourself that demonstrate the kind of things that you really, truly want to demonstrate. Be the commitment. Demonstrate with actions and words. Foster a belief of by believing it first, by that whole idea of you can do these things without committing harm. It's that old phrase that I've always heard when I was in safety, accidents are just a cost of doing business. No, they're not. And believing that and taking care of people first, that's the first step. That's the key to this whole process. And the goal is to keep people safe. So when we look at this and we're starting to take a look at the social aspect of it and getting to that last piece of this, it's critical to understand what the safety performance piece of this looks like. So we understand that people are tied together. So sometimes it's covenants, sometimes it's customs, protocols, mission. Then we do know this: the mission and the vision within your organization, that's the things you need to tie people to, because that, as an organization, you know where you're going. But part of the thing is also connecting with people. And when you connect with people, you need to understand what it all is and how you can best connect with them. So we're hardwired to pursue group harmony. That's the key to this process. So one of the things that came out of this discussion that he had with a lot of these folks is that, what are you looking at? How are you doing things as a group? How can you, tie that together with what you're trying to accomplish, but looking at the people and protecting the people. From that social aspect is that, a couple of years ago, several years ago now, I'm getting older and I'm not counting the years like I should be, I guess. But one of the things that came out of this was the fact that I had, I worked with, we did a lot of presentations, I guess, locally. And so people, it's now called the Windy City Area Safety and Health Work Group. When I was there, we called it GASH, but it was the Great Falls Area Safety and Health Work Group. And what we did was we put on monthly presentations and bring in different speakers and stuff to talk to different topics and stuff. And what I had a couple older gentlemen that were with SCORE. And SCORE is a program by the Chamber of Commerce where they bring in old retired business professionals, and they help new businesses. They give advice, they talk to them about the things that they need to do and things that they can, relate to and things like that. And so to help make their companies more prosperous, I guess, and more productivity and all that good stuff. But I ran into one of the SCORE guys one day, and we just happened to strike up a conversation. It was right around the turn of the century, around 1999, 2000, somewhere in there. And the movie Saving Private Ryan had just come out. And this guy was a Marine, and he actually did island hopping during World War II. So he was involved in that process of, taking this island and then mopping it up and then moving to the next island and moving the Japanese back towards Japan, an island at a time, basically. And he talked about it, and he said, watching that movie, it was nothing like that. He said, when you're in the, when you're storming the beach, you didn't storm the beach because you were told to storm the beach. You stormed the beach because that's what you didn't want to let your comrades down. You didn't want to let those people that you had trained with, lived with, you didn't want to see them get hurt, and you were going to do everything in your power to try and be as successful as you could be. But that's why you stormed the beach. It wasn't because they ordered you to storm the beach. It was because as a group, that's what you committed to. And I always found that interesting in the process that, his thought pattern was, it was that strong of a relationship. And how often do we see that in businesses? Now, granted, it's hard to take things that happen in the military and translate it over into the civilian side of things. But there is a social aspect of this that we need to pay attention to, that the more that we tie our people together socially and give them that ability to communicate and to interact as a group, the more successful we're going to be. Because if they take things on as a group, they're going to do things based on they don't want to let someone else in the group down, okay? So part of that is that you want to be able to plan those events. You want to give them some bonding, and you want to get to know each other, and it's incredibly important and powerful that they're able to do that, that they communicate, they understand each other's living conditions, they understand, those kind of personal things that happen with individuals as people kind of grow and things like that. You establish a routine time that you plan times for community, weekly lunches. We used to do it at State Fund for my section. We used to go out for birthdays, I guess. We would go out and do birthdays. Every now and then we also bring in food, and we sit down and we eat lunch together. And so you're not necessarily talking business, but you're getting to know one another. When you get these things together, this is that group dynamic part where things tie together. So from a safety standpoint, what you're doing is that you're building those relationships. And this is key in this process, because one of the things that I keep going back to was a piece in the employment engagement piece that said 93% of workers see coworkers taking chances to their life or limb, and only 25% of the people want to say anything to them because they're afraid that they're going to hit into that quagmire. They don't want to have that conversation and piss somebody off, and here we go down the road. The thing is that they're right. No matter how you look at it, if you are going to criticize someone, that criticism comes across loud and clear. However, the one thing, and you can throw the word constructive in there all you want. Constructive criticism hurts just as much as criticism hurts. The difference is that when you take a look and you have a relationship and you have that communication, that isn't necessarily viewed in the same level that if you have it, as just kind of, we know each other, this person says this to me, boy, that pissed me off, away we go. No, if you have a relationship and that person says, hey, I don't want to see you get hurt, you know that they mean that. And so that's takes away from that pain of that criticism that you might get. So you want to model that camaraderie. Take time to stop, talk with people, learn names, important details. One of the things that I would tell you is that, and I talk about this all the time with my boss, with the CEO of the company, but this is the same thing that happens between me and him. He doesn't talk to me all the time. Every now and then I probably have had 15 conversations with him, some of those presentations actually, over the 10 years that I worked at State Fund. But the difference is that, I just ran into him like 2 weeks ago at Staples. And we just stopped, talked to each other for a couple of minutes. He talked about some of the personal stuff he was going through with some of the COVID. He lost his dad. He's had some other things going on and things like that, taking care of his mom. We talked about some of the things that are happening with us. But you see, that's the difference, is it doesn't have to be all the time. It just, with him just connecting every now and then, I know he cares. I know that, the direction. I give him a lot of credit for where we are as an organization. And so those are the kind of things to think about. And again, you want to connect your team to your mission and your vision. And I think that this is huge, because you want to make sure that you understand how you did it. Now, this is a sample of what he had in there in the book, as far as what this is for a construction company. And I want to give you some background on this construction company. So he went in and he was talking about this, to the superintendent of this. And he says, okay, so what do you want out of this process? And of course, he was a consultant. And the superintendent said, well, I just don't want to hurt anybody. I want to make sure that we do the job right, blah, blah, blah. The same things always. And he said, no, that's not working for me. What are you truly after? And he said, you know what? This is going to be, he says, I'm getting older. I'm looking down the road, and I know that I'm not going to be doing too many more projects. This may be my last big project that I do. He says, this is really important to me. So he said, I would really like to treat my people the best that I can treat them. Treat them like normal. So when you think about it, when Rita and I are in our building at State Fund, there's coffee, there's clean facilities, the place is nice, it's comfortable, it's air conditioned, it's controlled environment, right? You're not going to fix all those things in construction. But one of the things he did was he did away with the porta potties, because he's working during wintertime and things like that. So what he had a trailer pulled in that actually has running water that's heated, so they can use the facilities and they can wash their hands after they're done. He put up a tent. So, hey. So this is one of the things that happened with him, that they had, he put up a tent so that they would have a place that they could eat, a place that was heated so that they could eat lunch, be comfortable. He started to address some of the quality of life things that construction workers aren't normally given out on a particular job site. And so he also started doing this thing where when people came on, so first thing in the morning, him and another one of the foremans would go out there to the front gate, and as people came in, they'd be telling them, hey, I'm glad to see you. Nice seeing you here. He was building up this relationship. They had this mission going on and everything else like that. And it was it was set a different tone. So the mission was to complete the project ahead of time, ahead of schedule, under budget, with great quality, without harming anyone, and having fun in the process. And I often think about that having fun in the process. So they really created a different environment there. And then their vision was to set a new standard of quality of life for the construction worker and prove that doing so is good business. And what they found is that when you're taking care of the workers and you're increasing morale, what happens to productivity again? It goes up. So this is the kind of things that we're looking at. Sometimes we get so much in the weeds. No, we're not going to provide that kind of stuff. Oh no, that's bull crap. We can't do that. And so this is the kind of thing to kind of think about as we go forward, okay? So this is just kind of some of the things that he put out there as far as how he put a mission and a vision, and he spelled out their roles. So from the leadership team's role, and then embodied everybody that was out there as a leader, he wanted them to embody the vision and the mission. He wanted them to address those things that was going forward. He wanted to enroll them. There's that word again, enroll. In other words, when you enroll, you make the commitment. And that's the piece that he really wanted to try and sell. That he wanted people to understand that going forward, you're actually tying people to a commitment. And he wanted to start with management and supervision and those kind of things. He wanted everybody on board. So he wanted them to enroll in this project, okay? He wanted to ensure they had stayed on mission. He wanted to eliminate anything that distracted them from the mission and have fun in the process, okay? One of the things that I would also talk about was the management's role. Again, embody the vision and the mission. And then the other part of that was to help supervision translate the vision and mission into tangible priorities, goals, behaviors, and activities and events. So in other words, he's now the leadership team, and then management's role is to actually help the leadership team get into those things. So account for the progress and performance, but have fun in the process. I think that key thing at the end is always to remind it that you don't want this to be a miserable event. You want people to enjoy being at work, okay? And of course, the last one with the supervisor's role, again, provide their people each day clear expectations that serve the mission, confirm the expectations and provide the resources, verify completion and quality of work, deliver appropriate kudos and corrective action when necessary. Again, getting into that process to where, from a safety standpoint, that is probably my worst attribute, is that I don't always say the kudos in the right places. Always willing to step up to the plate and tell them they didn't do the job right, but how often do we stop back and say, what you did, fantastic, I appreciate it, and have fun in the process. So I think that these are kind of unique thought patterns when we got in there. So when we put this together, I think this is an important process to think about, okay? With that, we're at 3 o'clock. And what I would like to do is I still want to practice a little bit of ergonomics and things like that. So what I would like to do is we're going to take about 10 minutes. Let's be back at about 3:10. But I want you guys to get out of those chairs. I want you to stretch. Let's get back about 3:10 and then, just kind of walk around and relax a little bit, and then we'll get back at it, okay? All right, 3. All right, is everyone back? It's 10 after. We'll go ahead and get started again. Okay, so when we're looking at this all in leadership, it just, to me, it was really fascinating looking at all the different aspects that were involved in this, but he put it in real terms. When he was first started getting involved with safety, one of the things that happened was they lost a person in the fact that they were supposed to be doing, they were supposed to be talking about the safety aspects of stuff, and they kind of skipped over stuff. They really didn't like these guys, so they kept them at arm's length. They didn't really talk to them about much, but it was a crane coming into contact with a high-powered electrical line, and the guy, of course, got electrocuted, and so it was one of those things that really affected him down the road. And I think that one of the things that his background too was the fact that his dad was a fireman, and so when he talked to his dad when he first, and this wasn't in the book, this was actually, you can YouTube him, and he has some things where he's had some other online discussions with some other folks. But he talked about one of the things that had happened when he told his dad that he was going to start getting involved in safety, that his dad said, I hope you understand that it's all between the ears, that it's all about their feelings, their emotions. It's all about the person. Understand that, and you're further ahead. So I think that these things all kind of come into play. But, I kept looking through the book trying to find what is this definition of all in leadership. And really it is about being all in. And I think that that's what this comes into play with. But specifically are looking at the safety performance. You need to look at the fact that your leadership is your best effective tool that you have in your toolbox when it comes to getting better performance from your people. Better and more sustained performance is through people. You need to address them as human beings again. And the other concept that you need to kind of put together is the fact that people and the planet are who's, not its, and it's unacceptable to produce business results at the expense of either of those two things. So if, again, going back to, that process where you're looking strictly at those kind of things where, you're looking at it's acceptable to lose some people. It's acceptable. We had 10 accidents last year. Okay, this year we're only going to have 5. Okay, well then who's the 5 that's going to get hurt? That's kind of the thought process there. Who's the 5 that you're willing to sacrifice to that kind of mindset? And one of the things that kind of came out of this was he was involved with a particular company. They had invited him in. He did training with these people, and of course, then they had a management session shortly after that. And the people the workers that were involved in the class were invited to come in and watch management. Management started putting up all the things on the screen that were opposite to what Court was talking about. This thing where you're looking at, that performance type of safety stuff where you're looking at counting numbers. It's the process. It's the number of things, those things that you're looking at that we typically look at, well, okay, so if we did 90%, we want to do 92% this year as far as how we want to get better. We're looking at things from a business standpoint, and that's how they were looking at it. And then one of the gals that was in the class decided to challenge management on this. And so she kept talking to him, and she says, now, wait a minute, you're talking the opposite of what we learned in class. And and the managers are saying, well, you understand, that's for you guys. For us, how we look at things is much different. And she's going, no, wait a minute, no, it can't be. So there was a long discussion over this. And she said, certainly there's got to be a difference between a broken piece of machinery and a broken person. That's got to be 2 different ways of looking at something, isn't it? And finally, the manager that was in charge of the meeting finally succumbed to that logic and said, you know what, you're right. We're looking at this thing a little bit different than what we should. So when we're looking at people, we should be looking at it one way. When we're talking about other things, we can go back to our processes and look at that. So these were kind of the things that he was talking about. One of the other, let me get it here. There we go. I got to make sure I'm over here in the right lane here. But anyway, one of the things that he talked about was putting it all together. So there's 5 conditions that he considers for performance. And the first one being is that you got a big game to play. In other words, every time you take up something, it's got to be a big game. You know, how often do you see it in the NFL? Well, even this year, and being a Broncos fan, I have to tell you, it's been a rough year. It's been a rough last 5 years, right? But one of the things is that you have to inspire people to get bigger than themselves. And that's really what the key to this thing is that sometimes we can't see that we can accomplish something, but as a team, we can accomplish it. We're bigger than the parts. I think it goes back to that. I can remember one of the speeches in that, remember the Titans, and they're at the last game and they're getting their butt kicked in the first half. And you know, the one player stood up and he says, we're not perfect. None of us in this room are perfect, but as a team, we are perfect. And so it's giving that concept of, you know, we can accomplish something bigger than what we are. And that's the big game. So we got to bring our big game play to this. Part of that also is that we have to be committed to it, but we have to have confidence in our victory. We can't go into this half-assed. We can't just expect that we're going to show up and things will fall our way. We actually have to step into this, and we have to be committed to this, take the actions that are necessary to win the big game, right? To achieve the things that we're setting out to achieve. And there's nothing bigger than you can do than that we're going to be able to do things without harming people in the process. We can accomplish the things that we need to business-wise, but we can do it without hurting anybody else on the team to do that, okay? So they can and they will achieve that big game to play. You want to cultivate positive images with your workers that they understand, you know, because they'll dig themselves holes sometimes. They'll get that negative aspect. They'll understand. They'll kind of fall back to that old thought pattern that they can't get any better than this. Again, remembering if you can't, whatever your self-image is, you will never outperform in that self-image. So this is really important that we help people create a positive self-image of themselves, because that helps them achieve things that they can go down the road with. We also want to create a sense of belonging. That team concept is so huge in this whole process that we need to make sure that we're working as a team, that we have that sense of belonging, that we're connected with one another. You know, when I was with the Department of Labor and Industry, and for 13 years, I will tell you that whenever we met, it was like a family. Even though we didn't work right next to one another, every time we got together, we broke bread, we talked with one another, we had a sense of belonging within the organization. And people, when they have that sense of belonging, are willing to stick around and try and achieve those goals that we want to achieve as an organization. And then, of course, the other one is that creating opportunities for growth. Everyone within the organization needs to understand that they have opportunities for growth, that they can spread their wings, that they can achieve things, and they're going forward with things. And so we need to create those opportunities for them, help them achieve the things that they want to do with their lives going forward, okay? Part of that we need to do is that avoiding the navel gazing piece. And when I first heard this phrase, I thought nasal gazing. And I thought, well, you know, whenever you hang your head, where are you looking? You know, you're looking at your navel, basically, right? So whenever you focus in on a problem, you're focused on, you know, oh, I don't know how to fix that problem. But this is a little different. This is that you want to focus on the fundamental problem. In other words, what the root, in safety, we call it a root cause, but it's really the fundamental problem instead of addressing systematic solutions. That's the thing, is that we always have a tendency to go back to that, well, this is going on and this is going on. So we're going to address those things that, you know, well, the person keeps coming in work, so we're going to, you know, late or something along those lines. You always find something that's systematic solution. And really, in actuality, in safety, more times than not, I hear, well, we just need to do more training. More training is not the answer, folks. If you've done your proper due diligence and you've trained these people, It's not about needing more training. It's about how we can, it's not about how to work safely, but the willingness to work safely, right? It's a different concept. We have to look at this a little bit differently than we have in the past. We keep thinking more training, more training, more training, when in fact it's really the willingness to work safety, the process in which we're willing to step away from ourselves and actually take this on in a different aspect. Okay. The other part of this is that, and I had to blank out part of this word, so I'm not sure how I approach this word here, but this is one of the things that he called the chicken crap theory. Okay. And what he talked about that is that, so he's talking with that one.
Hey, Kevin, you need to forward your slides.
Oh, crap. Okay. Hang on a minute. You know what happens? I got like 3 slides here. There we go. Sorry. Okay, that's navel gazing. I had my cursor in the wrong place and it turned slides over here in this one, but not on the presentation. My apologies. I'm sorry. But it talked about the fact that, okay, so when that superintendent, and he wanted to improve the workers' lives, right? The construction workers' lives. And he said, I wanted to do something different. And so when they got done with doing this, one of the things that happened out of that whole process was that management all of a sudden took a notice and said, regardless of the fact that you're ahead of schedule, regardless that you haven't had any major injuries or anything else like that, we are really not happy about the amount of money that you're spending. You know, you got that trailer out there, you put up the tent, these things are costing us money. And so we have an issue with that. And so he showed up with the consultants and they talked to management, and there was one vice president that just would not let it go. That one vice president would not let it go. And so finally, he actually made a visit to the site. And one of the things that he found when he went out there looking is that he went out and talked to, you know, he was out there looking, and there was an electrician, and the electrician was working for one company, but he actually got permission to work to help the plumber out because the plumbers were behind. And so he said, well, you know, I can't do much, but I can do some manual stuff that alleviates them to be able to do some other things. And so, and he said, well, why would you do that? Well, because we're a team out here. As a team, we're trying to accomplish things at this particular job site. And so he said, okay. So then he talked to a gal, and she was real, you know, she said, man, this is the best job site I have ever worked. And he said, well, you know, I've been given, you know, the superintendent and the 2 consultants a hard time about all the money they've spent to, you know, putting some of this stuff into play. He says, what do you think about that? And she goes, why would you do that? They're ahead of schedule. They're making money for the company. There was some expense. And so one of the things when they got done with this vice president and he left and they were talking amongst themselves, one of the things that the superintendent said, you know, I get these requests all the time. And the first thing that comes to my mind when I get a request for additional things to be out at the job site or something like that, he says, I think, well, that's chicken crap, you know? And so what he said was, well, that's, you know, that's something, a way that you should be looking at that different. If people are doing that, then maybe the next thing you need to do is the next time you say that's chicken crap, you need to, that now becomes the highest priority in what you need to accomplish. In other words, you need to work on that because that means something to those workers. And if they can get that, then you're much further ahead. Now, granted, you know, we're talking about theories and thought processes that sometimes, you know, you're just not going to have the money to install and things like that. But there's nothing wrong in trying to, you know, to meet these needs of these different people. And this is a thought process. And one of the themes throughout the entire book was the fact that when you look at things and you take a look, and this is a description that he put in there for heretic. And a heretic is a person who's holding on to an opinion that's at odds of what is generally accepted. This is a difference in how we're looking at things. So yes, when you come in and you start talking about these different aspects, people are going to say, well, they won't call you a heretic because that's a different terminology that most of us use. However, when you're thinking about that, that's in a different direction than most of us. So the key here is that we need to really look at this and become bigger than something than ourselves. We need to take on things that are bigger than ourselves and accomplish those things, because when that helps, when we do those kind of things, that really builds us up, and we really need to take those kind of things on. And so this is the thing, is that you shouldn't be afraid of being a heretic, and the fact is that becoming that hero is even more important. So this is the common theme throughout that entire book. I really found some really good stuff in that book. If you guys would, if you're interested, again, that there's what he, I've already listed the author and stuff, but I want you guys to kind of take into consideration these things as we go forward, okay? Any questions over anything we've covered? I think it's important to consider the fact that it's, that you're all in. That's the description of all in leadership. You're all in for everything that deals with leadership. All right. With that, here's what to expect. Rita's got, hopefully everybody has put their name, their company name, and their zip code and email address in there. And then what she'll do is she'll send you a copy of your certificate. It'll actually have your name on it this time, rather than the blank ones that you normally hand out at the workshops. And you guys will be able to, then there'll be a place to click that will actually take you to the evaluation. Please do the evaluation. I really do need that. That's one of the things that I look at, my boss looks at. It's important. It's got some good information in there. If you have any suggestions, I need to hear those. Again, this is that evaluation process, not be afraid to ask for evaluation from other people, what they think. I think that's important. And then, of course, hopefully you've gotten everything else. Is there any questions or anything else?
Would you give me the author again and the name of the book?
Sure. The name of the author is Cort, C-O-R-T, Dial. And the name of the,
D-I-A-L?
yeah, D-I-A-L.
Okay.
And the name of the book is Heretics to Heroes, a memoir on modern leadership. All righty. With that, thank you very much. Melissa, if you're there, if you would hold on for a little bit, I'd like to involve you in our discussion with Brita here. For everybody else, thank you very much. Is there any questions, comments? If not, I look forward to seeing you next time. The topics we're going to talk about next time, hearing conservation and safety committees. That's going to be in December, and I'll also be by Zoom. With that, thank you guys. See you, Chad.